I wake to the world held close by fog. It is not the casual, televisual fog that softens edges for the convenience of a camera. This fog has intention. It is the kind that collects around emissions and breathes a small, insistent life into them. The Ferris wheel silhouettes itself against nothing, a wheel of matte black that somehow seems to turn without spokes. An instrument that measures time by circumference rather than hours. Somewhere within the white hush a single laugh unravels bright, quick, then trailing off with a long tail of something that feels like recognition and like accusation at once. The laugh is a hook. It finds that raw place where memory and avoidance meet, and it pulls. I do not know why I answer. Only that my feet move with a certainty older than any reason I have cultivated. The entrance yawns like an open mouth beneath a dead banner, the carnival lamps sputtering their teal, cyan smear across film, grain night. The mist clings to the hem of my coat, a weight as mild and insistent as shame. I can feel the dented brass locket in my pocket through cloth and bone a small. Cool presence, and when I press my fingers to it the metal is colder than the night deserves. A laugh skitters again from deeper in the grounds, softer now, and the compulsion is no longer a tug but a current. It carries me past the ticket booth where the paint flakes like old promises, past a sign that once proclaimed wonders now flaked into an unreadable language. Lights drift in and out of focus. A carousel shuttered and still, horses frozen mid, gallop and their eyes blank as stage props. A string of bulbs with one bulb flaring like a heartbeat and then dying. A booth with its sign turned inward as though in shame. The path narrows and the fog folds around me, giving the impression that it is keeping the world behind. Silhouettes press against the veil of white, quick glimpses of shoulders, a child's outline at the edge of a lamp, the vague slope of a back I once leaned against. They appear and blur before the mind can settle on a name. Each blur is the shape of someone I left in a past not honest enough to stay inside memory. The presence behind those shapes is patient. It does not shout, it catalogues. I am not alone, not in the way the word wants me to imagine. Something watches the way I flinch at shapes, reads the cadence of my breath, counts how many times I slow. The laughing clown exists first as negative space. A gaunt silhouette inverted by rim light, a tail of stained ruffles dragging fog like a cloak. It tilts its head with that exact, theatrical curiosity that suggests pleasure in specificity. There is no distance to the clown's intent. It catalogues my omissions with the intimacy of a ledger. Around us the carnival rearranges itself like a film set between takes. Paths that led left now lead nowhere, distances stretch like camera lens tricks until my hands reach only air. To name it as a nightmare is insufficient. It is a constructed purgatory, a curated exhibition of things I chose not to attend. I find a dead-end alcove beneath a flickering lamp where the fog compacts into faces. They are never fully formed, never indulgent with detail. A child's profile turned away, an arm wrapped around nothing, a shoulder that sets the memory on a hinge so sharp it hurts to look. Each silhouette is a question I refuse to answer. Why did I leave? What did I believe would be better if I walked away? There is no accusation shouted into the dark. The accusation in the fog is softer and worse. Recognition. Each figure blurs as if the maze will not allow me the comfort of closure. It offers images to cut, not to heal. A bench waits with fog pooling at its legs, and when I look down, the dented brass locket is in my palm as if it had always been there, and also never there at all. The photograph inside is a shard of light, burned and clear in equal measure, a face I turned from, a laugh I muffled with silence. The memory snaps into place with the clarity of a film frame, a hospital corridor, the smell of disinfectant, a closed door, an apology swallowed whole by the act of walking away. In the glass of my memory I can see the soft scrape of a hand against a sheet, the small, honest expression on a face that had no right to bear itself to my indifference. The locket is proof that the maze is not random. It harvests what I left behind and stitches those absences into a path meant to make me remember or to punish me for forgetting. Sometimes I am not sure which is more merciless. The laughing clown's presence becomes a methodical business. It does not stomp or chase. It tilts and catalogues, its laughter a punctuation at the end of each of my small, unsuccessful evasions. When it speaks with motion, it is in the theatrical intimacy of a ringmaster who knows the exact hour of guilt by heart. It has a rusted hand bell that rings with a sound like dropped coins. The ring echoes in the fog, and for a moment the world goes thinner, the outlines of people collapsing closer to the point of being names. Its grin is painted in cracked white that bisects a face I cannot fully see, the paint fissuring like old guilt. The clown's demeanor implies that the past is not an accident, but a performance I once chose to accept, and that every moment I turned away was applause for a decision I had framed as inevitability. Every attempt to leave bends into a loop. The paths rearrange like a memory choosing which parts to show, corners lengthen, so that the steps I take are measured by a silence that grows like tide. I learn through failure. A turn that should put me at the edge of the grounds instead unspools into another lamp and another silhouette. Distances breathe. I step and the finish line retreats. This is never confusion. The maze is a pedagogy of discomfort. Its design is to keep me looking at what I avoided. Being trapped becomes the point, shaping me into someone who cannot look away because the act of not looking is precisely what it aims to punish. There is a cruelty in the curriculum, but it is specific, almost clinical. Show insist, let the student make the choice. The sounds of the carnival are all off key. The music from a shuttered booth plays a single bar of a song that keeps repeating, as if the world has sided with a broken record. The manual wind of a child's toy winds somewhere and then stops, and I know the silence is staged. The Ferris wheel's slow creak is like a metronome marking the time I spent away. Once, some time before, I would have rationalized my movement as practical necessary departures, inevitable drift. Now every rationalization receives immediate contradiction in the fog's quiet inventory. Then I stand before a tent whose canvas is heavy with rain that never fell, its fabric sweating beads that do not know their source. The flap falls away like a curtain, and inside are mirrors. They are not clean, not generous. Each surface is streaked with breath and rain fogged in sections, and when I look I see not the present face in the glass, but a college of choices that compress into one image. The mirrors do not reflect light, they reflect consequence. My face fragments across panes the lean outline, the thin scar across the left eyebrow, the hollowing at the cheeks when I tighten my jaw. Overlaying those features are faces of people I left. Mouths mid, silence, hands reaching and withdrawing, the small helplessness of a child's acceptance that I would not be there. The pains compound like a history painting rendered in shards. The clown's laugh peals through the tent as if it were composed of many layered recordings. It is softer now and filled with the mechanical sound of a child's toy slowly winding down to mute. The laughter is both obstacle and key. It dares me to look at what the mirrors show or to turn away and let the reflections rot into accretion. There is a decision compressed into that pause, small enough to fit inside a heartbeat. To acknowledge is to take the ragged image of those abandoned people into myself and allow their shapes to rearrange me. To turn away is to give the maze permission to own my silence. The choice is not grand. It is internal and surgical and delivered in the wet light of pre-dawn. I reach for a pane and my fingers leave prints that look like small confessions. In the broken reflection I see a moment I had not allowed into the ledger. The precise angle at which I closed the door, the hesitation that became a decision, the exact syllable I swallowed. Memory supplies detail because it is greedy, not because it is kind. I see the paint on the hallway baseboard scuffed, where my boot scraped, the hospital corridor light casting a small bar across linoleum, a chair left half pulled from the wall. These are not heroic images. They are not scenes constructed for redemption. They are ordinary betrayals, counted, catalogue. The clown watches with a cataloger's patience. When the mirror fragments not with a crash, but as if a film strip were being gently torn out, my reflection flares into a montage of endings, and I feel the edge of something ancient. The recognition that my absences are as real as any wound. The pain is not cinematic, it is the slow, persistent ache of a missing tooth. There is no single punishment, only an accumulation. The mirror world fractures not to punish spectacularly, but to ensure there will be slices I cannot reassemble into a story that absolves me. When I stumble out into thinning fog after the mirror's splinter, the carnival seems to reset. The Ferris wheel keeps its slow, indifferent rotation. There on a fence post a single stained ruffled collar snags like a comma left at the end of a sentence. It is small and ridiculous and unbearably specific. It smells faintly of cotton candy gone bitter and of antiseptic in hospital halls. For a long while I stand and let the wind carry away the last of the fog, and I catalogue what I have traded for the glimpse. A memory given weight, a decision no longer anonymous. The collar is evidence that acknowledgement is not absolution. It is a ledger entry. The clone remains at the margin, a smear of teal against the pale horizon, not triumphant but meticulous. It does not celebrate what I call choice. It notes only that the ledger has been updated and that there will be interest. The maze is not done. The Ferris wheel turning is not benign. I touched the mirrors, and that touch answered the laugh in some partial way, but the collar on the fence is proof that acknowledgement begets obligation rather than release. The maze will call again. This was the opening of a file. The clown will catalogue again. Whatever reckoning was required tonight has been started, not finished. I walk away with the locket cold against my sternum like a small, private weight. My steps are measured. The edges of the ground still rearrange with minor, malicious shifts. A lamp that once hung above a straight path now marks a curve. A bench is where a gate used to be. The fog thins like breath after holding it too long. But there is a trace in the air of the thing that moved me first, that bright laugh braided into the night. Behind me the carnival accents glitter in teal and red, colors like the memory of some beautiful thing turned sideways. Each vanish of color is a reminder that what was once vibrant can be reoriented into accusation. The dented watch in my pocket is stopped at an unknown hour, and I cannot tell if the time is before or after the choice. The teeth of the clown's grin haunt the corner of trivial hours, as if the face could be conjured from a particular pattern of past omissions. I learn to breathe differently, to hold my voice smaller, to keep my hands in my pockets when I pass mirrors that might ask me to give account again. Each morning afterwards is edged with the light from that Ferris wheel, a palette of teal, cyan punctuated with sudden, accusing slashes of red. The world seems to have acquired a soundtrack of distant laughter and metallic creaks, the small percussion of a place that keeps a ledger. There is a curious mercy in what I saw. The maze did not convict with a roaring prosecutor. It offered me a sequence of glimpses that forced the work of recognition. The mercy is that the images were mine to hold. The punishment is that I now have them. The cost is precise and quiet. I carry the collar's memory like an obligation, an artifact of responsibility. The maze removed the safety of forgetting and replaced it with a raw, continued awareness. Forgetting had been a convenience. The maze turned convenience into an ethical deficit. I cannot say that I am better. I can say that I am different. The laugh still echoes in certain rooms, lodged in the cavity where I once kept easy answers. Sometimes, in the thin hours before the city fumbles into morning, I think I hear that rusted bell ring in the distance, and I wonder whether the clown is merely an instrument of a conscience or an entity that enjoys the slow arithmetic of regret. Either way, the maze taught me two things: that leaving creates architecture and that architecture shapes its occupants. If absence is a room, then I now know how rooms hold weight. I return sometimes to the fence in my mind and picture the ruffled collar snagged on the post, the Ferris wheel turning like a metronome, the clown at the edge cataloguing patiently. The image is not a comfort, it is a template. There are instances where I rehearse revisionist histories, the versions where I stayed, the variations where I did nothing differently but all turns led elsewhere, and the maze incisively collapses those rehearsals. Memory is not merely a matter of retrieval but of responsibility. Whatever truth the maze demanded that night is partial. My hands are not clean. I did not step through the mirrors and emerge absolved. I stepped through and emerged accountable in a way I had not been before. Accountability does not erase consequence. The fog will return with seasons or with my next failure, and the laugh will find the crack in whatever complacency remains. For now, I have the metal of the locket cold against my chest and the knowledge that to leave is to build places where others might wait for me. To stay is to risk carrying what I still refuse to name. Both choices have architecture, both create rooms where people might be left to build their own small catastrophes. The Ferris wheel keeps turning in its slow, indifferent orbit. The collar still hangs, the clown will wait. The maze has taught me the grammar of my omissions and left me with a task. To keep walking toward what I left until the pattern changes, or until I am no longer capable of noticing the laughter. I do not know which will come first. I do not know if the maze is benevolent or merely surgical in its cruelty. I only know that the laugh will return, patient as tide, and that one day the ledger will demand a fuller reckoning than the mirrors allowed. Until then I keep my voice small, my coat buttoned, and my hands on the locket like a promise I can barely keep. And there is a wildness to it, an odd sort of relief. The maze gives me a map not by erasing, but by exposing the seams. Each seam is a question stitched into skin. I have learned to carry these seams without letting them define every movement. They are a pressure behind the ribs that keeps me honest. Walking through an ordinary day is different now. A grocery aisle becomes an alley of possible departures, a coffee shop window a pane where faces might gather like audiences. I am more careful with the way I let people leave my company, less casual about the moments I consider negotiable. Some nights I imagine the clown cataloguing not only my absences, but the absences of others I do not know. It is vague and anthropic, a puppet master of regret who keeps books on all manner of departures. That thought comforts and alarms me. Comfort in that I am not singular in my missteps. Alarm in that the ledger is endless. The carnival suggests there is always another account to be settled, another mirror to approach. It insists on the slow arithmetic of living. Every leaving counts. I cannot promise that I will never again become the person who walks away. I can only try to be someone who knows the cost. The locket sometimes warms in my hand the way an ember warms a palm, reminding me that whatever I carry can either be used to kindle or to burn. The collar on that wire fence is a lesson and a fugue. It loops through my thoughts, sometimes in snatches of melody, sometimes as fog hung like a held breath. It pulled at my boots and slid up the calves of my coat in a slow, indifferent tide. Where the path should have been there was only a silvered blur of lamp posts and the faint suggestion of a carousel song, stretched and snapped until it sounded like a laugh. The laugh was bright and too familiar. It found me before I knew I was waiting. Compulsion did what regret had failed to do, it moved my feet. I told myself the maze demanded me by name, but the truth was smaller and meaner. The fog remembered how I'd left things. It knows the margin where people become absence, and it presses at that margin like a patient interrogator. The first silhouette I met was a posture rather than a face, folded arms, a slump of shoulders that accused without pointing. A lamp behind it spat a sputtering teal that rhymed the collar of its coat in impossible clarity. I stopped because the air pressed in, and because the laugh had threaded itself through the space between us like a needle. The laugh was not only sound. It had weight, a tactile quality that rearranged the fog like hands. It tilted my head, It catalogued me with a single tiny bell of amusement. I had lived long enough to recognize cruelty wrapped as play. The silhouette did not move, but the distance between us collapsed as though memory had become geography. I could feel the locket at my throat in the very space, just beneath the collarbone, where it used to sit more often, its brass warmed by my pulse. Compulsion is a poor navigator, but it is relentless. The maze produces its tableaux in tight, intimate frames the way an old camera keeps to its best light. Between lampposts the fog thinned into slices, and each slice held a photograph I had not consented to. A battered kitchen table, frozen mid-slice, a pair of hands dividing bread that remained untouched. A mouth opening into a hush that should have been an apology each image caught and held with microscopic attention until it hurt. The silhouettes held these instants like offerings on their palms and illuminated them long enough to sting, then let them dim until only the outline remained. I found I could not look away. Every face felt like an inventory I owed. Silhouettes are meaningfully specific. A shoulder cocked in a way that belonged to a girl I had promised to call. A tilt of the head that was the exact cadence of the voice I left at a hospital bed. Small domestic motions, an index finger tracing a chipped mug. The slip of a photograph back into a wallet accumulated and swelled until they mapped the full geography of my betrayals. The compulsion turned investigation into penance. The more I traced, the more the maze offered. It is not a place that forgets. It is a place that remembers me poorly and cruelly. When the locket appeared, it was a violation of scale. It did not hang at my throat and swing with the pendulum of my breathing. It emerged as if the fog itself had exhaled the brass into the air. It rotated slowly, caught a stray arc of lamplight, and then held there like a small sun. The dent in its rim was the same dent I had dropped onto a kitchen floor in anger once, and the photograph inside split across the crease with the same tiny nick. Recognition folded me inward with acute precision. Memory is a ledger. The locket was the last entry I had scribbled into the margins and then tried to hide. The path rearranged itself like a theta set, lamps guttered, revealing alcoves where faces stared like small accusations pinned under glass. The laughing clown arrived as any predator does in fog on the edge of visibility, cataloguing, amused. It tilted its head the way collectors tilt a jar to see what settles. The grin carved in cracked face paint mapped the names I had not yet recalled. Its painted teeth were a ledger whose margins never closed. Where I had been precise in my memory, I was not in my remorse. I had always been practical in the wrong ways. The clown's presence made the mannequins of my choices step into clearer light. I learned then that the clown did not merely appear. It arranged. It threaded the tableau with its bell, and each ring reordered the silhouettes into darker compositions. A camping trip that should have been gentle became a tableau of a voice that dwindled. A birthday cake turned into a tabletop of echoes. The clown's tilt guided which memory would bloom and which would shrivel. It exercised methodical cruelty, turning memory into accusation with the neatness of a ledger keeper making tidy columns of things unsaid and promises broken. The corridor of reaching hands hissed with the rustle of fabric. Two paths split, like a pair of gills beneath a lamp that hesitated between dying and flaring. One a slate corridor whose air smelled faintly of bleach, the other warmer and freighted with the sore sweetness of rotting paperbacks. The moral gambit presented itself without fanfare. Down one corridor a face reached and blurred, promising erasure if I walked away. Down the other a familiar laugh would splinter into something cruel if I followed. The maze invited choice, or so it pretended. Each hesitation cost a silhouette its shape. The maze punished avoidance the way tides punish unmoving rock. I remember the sudden urge to run across that threshold to salvage everything at once, as though speed could stitch the phrase. The impulse felt like a child's frantic, earnest, and blind with hope. Instead I chose by small arithmetic. A hand I recognized and the ache in my chest that answered a scar along my eyebrow. The consequences were immediate and intimate. A corridor collapsed into a memory that snapped like film. A face I pursued popped into a tableau that rewound into silence. The clown catalogued each loss as though avid to add another notch to its record. Choice became a ledger entry I did not sign freely. The maze trafficked in particulars. It treated omissions as physical objects. The corridor that opened to the right smelled of coffee gone old. In its center, a chair sat empty where a figure had once been expected. The left corridor carried the hush of a waiting room. A coat hung over the back of a seat like a flag marking ground I had ceded. Every failed arrival, every unmade phone call, every email never sent unspooled into tableaux that refused to be abstract. The clown's bell measured them, as if tolling each one into being. At the maze's heart the mirror waited like a verdict. It stood where a fountain might have been in a kinder place, rain streaking down its surface though the fog itself was dry, light breaking on it in shards. A reflection did not greet me, an accusation did. The frame caught the light differently, so that stepping close made the glass breathe, in a way that felt almost like listening. The mirror demanded immersion, and when I stepped through it felt like stepping into the hinge of a decision. The world inside was governed by the momentum of leaving. The lunch I missed, the hospital corridor I avoided, the email I never sent, each relived in the granular particularity of motions and small gestures I had longed to forget. I could feel the weight of leaving in the bones of my hands, the exact angle my shoulder made when I turned away. Memory's pressure is not abstract. It is kinetic and hot and finally undeniable. I could smell the antiseptic of the hospital like a dull bell, even though I had not been within those walls in years. In the mirror I watched myself learn how to be smaller, how to make myself less essential to other people's arrangements. I watched, with a tenderness that hurt, the minute decisions neatly line up until they formed a barrier between me and the people I had promised to hold. The clown's laugh swelled into a layered chorus, a high trill over a rasp that vibrated in my teeth. It did not shout. It catalogued with an almost tender cruelty, as if by enumerating the ledger it might teach me the consequence of each omission. It was relentless in a way that felt intimate, like breath in the ear. The mirror refused to let me score the encounter as a near thing. There was no cunning escape. Either I accepted the ledger's entries as mine, or I performed some frantic attempt to rewrite the past with gestures the maze would not honor. The truth was simple and terrible. To flee would be to scatter the silhouettes into shapes they might never reclaim. I chose. The act of choosing was neither heroic nor theatrical. It was a labor of acceptance and a terrible concession. In the mirror I stepped toward the memory and did not step back. I felt the precise grief of the others who had become silhouettes. It was not the big, tidy confession I imagined in other lives. It was the small, accurate H of recognizing where I had been wrong. I felt the sound of that H like a small instrument tuning up in the empty places behind my ribs. The maze acknowledged this. Some silhouettes softened, regained their edges. Others contorted into parodies beneath the clown's grin. The geometry of the place changed like land after an earthquake. But change was partial and messy. The maze altered, but it did not dissolve. When I stumbled back into the thinning path, I carried weight that did not belong entirely to me. I had not fixed what I had broken. I had met my ledger without flinching, and the admission made some of the silhouettes glow with an exhausted kindness I had not expected. That kindness did not absolve me. It was careful, almost bureaucratic in its generosity, the sort you might expect from someone who has decided to begin again but cannot yet perform miracles. The clown clapped once a dry, metallic sound that answered me through the fog, and somewhere a carousel tooth clicked. The sound felt like punctuation, not closure. At the perimeter the Ferris wheel loomed, its spokes like a radial memory anchored to the dark skyline. It turned slowly, as though considering whether its next rotation would reveal more than it already had. A fence ran along the edge, and on it a single stained ruffled collar was pinned like a flag. The collar's frayed tucks had the smell of sugar and rust, and the faint crust of something sweet hardened with time. I did not look around for closure. The air tasted like the metal of the clown's bell. The collar reminded me that the procession of reckonings had more steps than the ledger I had just reconciled. The laugh had not gone quiet. It had only receded, like a tide pulling out to show what it had taken. I realized then that the maze did not trap me in cyclical cruelty so much as in a curriculum. One must take lesson after lesson until the ledger is learned enough to stop opening wounds. The maze is pedagogy disguised as torment. It keeps setting exercises. Here, notice how you sheltered yourself behind excuses. Here, feel the small sting of a missed birthday. Here, watch the way absence expands like a bruise when tended only by silence. The clown proctors these lessons with a grin that pretends to be kind. Now memory shapes my days in different proportions. The dented locket is a pressure I feel when I push open a door. It is the small, constant nudge toward accountability. The scar beneath my eyebrow treks with me in mirrors. My watch sits cold and stubborn on the wrong hour, a small device that reminds me time is a resource I once squandered. Loneliness is not the absence of people, but the measure of distance I have allowed to grow. Distance, I learned in that rain-streaked chamber, is architecture. I built corridors by leaving doorways unmanned. I allowed hallways to lengthen with small omissions until they became the maze I walked that night. There are moments when I mistake absence for freedom. When I tell myself that not returning was a kind mercy, that by not showing up I had spared someone else the labor of my flawed presence. The fog does not permit that kindness. It returns those moments as tableaux so precise and patient they feel like justice. But justice here is ambivalent. The clown taught me that cruelty can wear a ribbon and still be cruelty. It catalogues and it teases. It does not forgive by default. It wants me to learn the weight of decisions, as if the lesson could be embodied by the slow cadence of its laughter. It would be dishonest to imagine the maze's finality. The Ferris wheel's silhouette will return in my sleep. The bell's metallic click will appear when a door closes. Escape, if there is an echo of escape, is partial. Some corridors unbuild themselves when I lay my hand on the dented brass and trace the photograph as if touching could make repair. A worn thumb can realign edges of memory in tiny ways, send an apology that lands, pick up a call after years, show up with coffee on a Tuesday, and these gestures make slight, hopeful architecture. Others' corridors do not yield. There are rooms I cannot re-enter, faces I cannot fully restore. The clown's grin remains a map of what I have not yet reconciled. In the end, there is a singular, small mercy. The fog thins enough to let me see the ground, and when I look down there are footprints not entirely mine. Impressions left by those who waited for me to come home, and those who never did. Some are suppressed, half-healed tracks. Some are incised deep like tree roots. The maze taught me to read such prints as responsibilities rather than indictments. They are not a sentence. They are a geography of the people I have been careless with. The lesson is not finished, but it is clearer. I leave a piece of myself at that fence beside the Ferris wheel. A promise that I might try to make amends where amends are possible, a recognition that some things cannot be restored, and a willingness to keep the ledger honest. I pin nothing physically to the collar. Instead, I fold a little internal oath into the crease of my chest. To call when I say I will, to stand when I am needed even if inconvenient, to tell the truth when being kind tempts me to soften it into silence. The clown's laugh visits on cold afternoons, and sometimes when I set the brass locket on a table and rub its dent with a thumb. The laugh shrinks for a beat as if listening. It is not comfort, it is acknowledgement. If you find the maze, you will not find easy absolution. The place does not grant what life makes scarce. It presses you into the truth of your absences and arranges those moments into a curriculum of recognition. Perhaps that is mercy of a kind, the insistence that you hold what you once refused to keep. Mercy here is insistence. It is the slow teaching of consequence until the deep reflexes of evasion are unlearned. The fog will curl again. I know this because the collar on the fence trembles when the wind finds it, and because even now, in the quiet hours, the laugh comes back as if rehearsing its catalogue. I do not crave the nightmare. I crave the work that made me face it. The clown will come when I grow still. It will tilt its head and wait. I will meet it with fewer evasions. There is no final untying here, no single luminous absolution. There is only the slow, ledgered work of being present where I once fled. I step away from the Ferris wheel and do not claim to be finished. I only claim to be moved. The maze has altered me in ways precise and terrible. The silhouettes remain, some softened, some sharp, and the collar pinned to the fence will keep its quiet admonition until the laugh no longer has business with me. That, perhaps, is the margin where hope is born, not in erasing the ledger but in learning to carry it straight. When the fog curls next, I will not run from the laugh. I will trace the seams of the choices I have made and, where possible, speak the truths I withheld. I will attempt the small reparations that avert the architecture of abandonment. A knock on a door, a letter slid under a threshold, a hand held through a bad minute. The maze will be patient. The laughing clown will be attentive. I will keep my watch cold at my wrist and let the stopped hour remind me that time does not forgive by default. It only permits work. The night thins into a dawn that refuses to break cleanly. The Ferris wheel spins a quarter turn, as if aware of its audience, and then stills. The ruffled collar flutters like a page turned but not finished. The laugh falls away on a wind that tastes of cotton candy and rust. I breathe, and the breath is my own for the moment, but the corridor remains. The lesson, I now understand, is not to end. It is to continue with the ledger open and the handwriting honest. The maze teaches me the difference.